So let's say I have this idea that says, or this, whatever, this idea that says I'm in love with any idea to which I am, or from which I'm perpetually thinking. So if I'm constantly thinking from the idea that, let's say, women are crazy. They're all crazy, man. Doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter what you do. They're always going to be this way, and there's nothing you can do to please them, and you're never going to be enough, or they're always going to be angry, blah, blah, blah. If I find myself habitually thinking from that idea, which is to say thinking thoughts that kind of, I could trace them back to that basic assumption, right, that there's truth about women. I mean, it sounds like, well, she's crazy here, or this, and she wants this, and all this. If I'm thinking it all the time, I'm in love with that idea. I don't think from ideas that I'm not in love with. And now, what are the consequences, though, of my constantly thinking from that idea? Well, one of them might be, if I'm convinced that women are crazy and it doesn't matter what I do, I might not notice those choices that I make in terms of who I'm going to be hanging out with, the female company I'm keeping, the manner in which I'm interacting with her, the things that I do, the red flags that I ignore, whatever. I'm going to overlook all that stuff because, remember, it doesn't matter what I do because they're all crazy. Now, the consequences of that idea is that I'm going to probably end up with a lot of women who are crazy, or I'm going to end up with a good lady and I'm going to perceive her behavior as crazy, even if it's not, right? Because I'm constantly thinking from that aside. I know you're crazy before we even got in a relationship. And, I'm either going to select a nutty one, or I'm going to find a way to experience reasonable demands that she makes as being kind of crazy. And I'm going to suffer. I'm going to feel oppressed. I'm going to feel like classic kind of like the man's like, oh, I got to do this and that now, right? And so I'm in love with the idea that all women are crazy, but I'm not necessarily in love with the consequences of entertaining that idea. Like, for example, making poor choices, right? Or talking to, because I noticed that I, and that, by the way, I got that idea from my dad, right? He sat me down and would tell me, he said, they're all crazy. And he got to the point where he'd be like, hey, right? He wouldn't even say the whole thing. He'd just go, crazy, all of them. Remember. And I noticed that as a result of my kind of believing that, at every level of decision making, I made bad choices. I picked the wrong women. I interacted with them in the wrong way. I responded to the blow-ups in the wrong way. I didn't leave them. I didn't change how I was interacting with them, right? And it took me a long time to realize I'm creating a lot of my experience of this craziness, right?
I can't help but interrupt you because you were literally describing you were literally like describing the definition of ideological possession, because that's essentially what you're talking about. You have this idea in your head that all women are crazy, and this idea is preventing you from actually seeing what crazy women are, and it's actually preventing you from seeing anything that you're doing. And when someone is ideologically possessed, all they have is an idea that women are crazy, women are crazy, women are crazy. You can't audit how you are. You can't see what you're doing right. You can't even see what you're doing right. So if you have no metric, if you have no tool to measure what you're doing right, forget about it. Like,
right, no chance.
You're done.
No chance. You won't. I mean, here's a kind of general principle. If I believe that an outcome is inevitable, right? That's like an idea, right? So I'm in love with that idea. I just assume that a given undesirable outcome is inevitable. My belief that that outcome,
that insane, really. But go ahead.
Well, my belief that outcome is inevitable will cause me to overlook opportunities to prevent that outcome from happening or create a different one. It's very, very difficult for me to see opportunities to create realities that are different than the one I think has to be. This is that whole what is, what can be thing, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like I don't want to mold my beliefs about possibility off of what's currently true, because what's currently true is just one example of what can be true. It's not the only example. It doesn't tell me about what can't happen moving forward. There's all kinds of amazing things that don't happen until they do. And the moment before those great things happen, somebody says, that's never happened before. That can't happen. If it was going to happen, it would have happened already. Bam. And then it happened. It happens for the first time. And so if I'm sitting here telling myself that something's not possible because it hasn't already happened for me, what does it mean that the good thing hasn't happened to me yet? Didn't happen to my parents? What does that mean? Does it have to mean that it can't happen? Does it have to mean that it's not possible? It doesn't have to. But very often I get kind of tricked into assigning that meaning to it. And when I consent, like you said, the ideological possession, there's this idea that your soul consists of all that you believe and consent to is true. And when I consent to is true, the idea that women are all crazy, that affects my reality creating process. It affects the way in which I interact with my reality, the results that I get, right? And awareness for me is sort of exercising those demons, because I begin to see the idea in operation. I witness the idea activate. I see the thoughts flow from that idea. I see how I feel when I'm entertaining that idea. I see how those feelings manifest as behaviors. I see how those behaviors create certain results. I witness that creative process rather than being immersed in the consequences of my creative process, which is to say, rather than living in a life that I built based on my ideas, I begin to actually witness that process. I see how the sausage is made, right? Oh,
let me ask you this. So, what would someone's reason be for believing or forcing themselves to believe that all women are crazy? If this belief has not been helping them, what is their rationalization for holding on to this belief that's not even necessarily helping them? Why would someone do that?
I think that here's a general principle. Every behavior makes sense when you view it in the full context in which it's occurring. So, somebody embraces, say, a life of crime, and someone from the outside says, why would anybody ever do that? It's like, well, you don't know the full context. You don't know what it was like growing up, not having anything to eat. You don't know what it was like being in a social circle where that was the only sense of community, or that was the meaningful sense of community. You got that was your first experience of feeling like a man, or feeling like you had friends, or what, it makes a hell of a lot. It's just like in general, when you understand what leads to a certain outcome, that outcome begins to make a hell of a lot more sense. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to look at only the outcome and to know nothing about what led to it and say, well, that doesn't make sense. That's stupid. That just must be a person who's making bad choices. It's like, well, maybe so, but there are contexts in which a person can be induced to make sense out of making bad choices. And that is a thing that happens, right? Now, that doesn't contradict personal responsibility. It's
kind of like it's a side effect from being ideologically possessed, that you start to make yourself believe that for whatever reason, by any means necessary, what I'm believing is true. That's a side effect of being contaminated by that idea. That's fucking crazy.
Think about it like this. Like, let's say that, because I think a lot of this stuff is inherited. I know it was for me anyway. So I'm living in a household that has been shaped partly by my father's belief that all women are crazy. What does that mean? It means he selected a woman that was a little bit crazy. He interacted with her in ways that weren't even maximally useful, right? So he's got a crazy lady that he doesn't even know how to handle properly. We have a crazy environment here. So the environment in which I grew up was a consequence in part of the belief of his that all women are crazy. And it's also the environment in which I was taught the belief. And I looked around me and said, well, shit, I think you might be right, right? There was a small sample size, just one lady. And then I carry that belief with me into my environment, my new environment that I move into. Yeah. And then it begins to generate itself there. It begins to proliferate. It begins to manufacture evidence there. And I go, oh my God, this is wild, because she's acting just like my stepmom used to act. That's crazy, And then I get really convinced. And if I don't watch all of that, I don't realize I'm involved in a con. This is one of those things, is that you win the con by recognizing that it's a con and refusing to play it. And I think that in order to do that, you got to understand that, these beliefs seduce you. Is it the most unresourceful beliefs, the things that are robbing you of the life that you could be having? They whisper in your ear and they say, don't you see how obviously true I am? Look at what he did. Look at what's going on over here. Look at that. And because they are like a parasite living in your mind, and they want you to stay there, and it's like, this is the enemies of a man's enemies, or of his own household, of his own mental household. There are ideas whispering in my mental ear, morning, noon, and night, right? Bullshitting me about what I can't do, about what has to happen that I don't want, and all this. And it's about taking that audit and looking and saying, who are you? I want to speak. I want to get you out here. Get that. I want to examine that belief just for a minute, because I want to see what's going on in here. Because that's usually what's messing me up.
Yeah.
And if there are problems outside.
Yeah. What you just described is I'm looking into. They're called memetics. They're called memes. These ideas that they're basically collections of ideas that propagate themselves throughout evolution. It's I think it's a Darwinian. It's a Dawkins or Darwinian. It's a Darwinian theory of memetics. So these are ideas that propagate themselves throughout evolution that carry from one population, one person, and they constantly carry throughout the evolution, and they constantly get worse or better. They literally just infect minds, and they infect people, and they almost become biologically wired. So it's the idea that because your dad's dad probably told your dad, and your grandfather probably told him that all women were crazy, and your great grandfather probably told your dad that all women were crazy. So by the time that this memetic got to you, it's and by the, so let's pretend that you. So do you believe that? By the way, I don't think you ever said.
No, I don't believe in blaming the game for my lack of skill.
Yeah.
I simply refuse to do that. I mean, and I say to myself this, I say, let's say it's true, whatever that even means. I don't believe it's true, but let's say it is true that all women are crazy, right?
Yeah.
Am I going to maximize my chances of having a happy relationship with a woman by believing she's crazy, or by believing that she and I have capacities to do stupid things or smart things, and that sometimes we both do stupid things and sometimes we both do smart things, and sometimes one's stupid, one's smart, and trying to figure out how to create kind of more harmony between us that way? And so, no, I don't believe it. And even if I did believe it, I'd pretend like I didn't, because believing it is not going to be useful, I don't think.
Yeah. So let's pretend that you did believe that.
Mm-hmm.
By the time that, I don't know what happened, maybe this is a sign that this meme or this idea wasn't actually true, because a sign that if a memetic doesn't carry itself out, then that means that it's not true. So by the fact that you don't think that, because it didn't just start with your dad. Like I think you know that too. It didn't just start with him. This is something that's been passed down. So the fact that you were told that, and probably the same way that your dad's dad was taught that, the fact that you don't believe that is evidence that that's not true. That's something, I think that's something really interesting to think about. Because when you think about like that, you can look at any ideas. Like, let's say if your parents are telling you that, black when you see a black person, like, run, or when you see a white person, that means they're like evil or something. And you have to think about, okay, where did that person get that idea from? Right, their parents put that idea in their head, and their parents put that idea in their head, and their parents put that idea in their head. So you have to think about being this one generation, being this special generation. You have to think about this. So if I believe this, if I don't believe this, that means it's not true. And once you understand that, because a lot of people get in this position where, okay, do I listen to my mom that's telling me that, all men are going to rape me? Do I listen to my mom, or do I go out and do I become an individual, and do I do my own due diligence? The fact that you're choosing between those two things means that your presupposition is false. So once you understand that, you know that there is an idea of objective truth. It's not just subjective. Because if you do not believe that, because you're asking yourself, I think that's something really interesting, because a lot of people now, these contagious parasites in their minds, it's been passed down through so many generations. Some people, it's biologically part of them to lean towards like a leftist utopian type of sense of thinking. It's like embedded in their biology. Like, some people, I truly believe some people are biologically wired to just be not crazy, but to just be more left leaning. And I think this generation is special because we have the internet, we have these things, we have high-speed internet, we have endless information at our fingertips. So this generation is special because we are the pioneers, not pioneers. We're experts before we become experts. Because once that meme got transferred to our minds, when your grandmother told your mom that, she couldn't have just Googled, "Are all men crazy?"
Right.
She couldn't have just. She would have had to take her word for it, or she would have had to go out in the world and take an empirical stance towards it. But if if that idea was told to her through just strictly empiricism, that idea is already planted inside her mind. She has no other outlet to contend against that. She can't go on the
Mm-hmm.
internet. She can't watch a video. She can't go anywhere. She has to strictly go by her judgment. But
Right.
this generation is special because we have tools, we have technology, we have these great things that we can go and educate ourselves, and we don't have to be products of a terrible meme or a terrible idea that would essentially destruct our whole entire lives.